Good morning. The South Coast Air Quality Management District Hearing Board is in session. Today is Thursday, June 28, 2018. The time is 9:05 a.m. and we are meeting in the hearing board room in Diamond Bar. And we have two matters on the calendar for today. One case, and that is Eastern Municipal Water District, case number 4937-57 for a regular variance, and the other is our hearing board general meeting, which will take place after the hearing. And who is representing Eastern Municipal Water District this morning?
Curtis Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. And who is representing the executive officer this morning?
Stacy Pruitt for the executive officer.
Thank you, Ms. Pruitt. I see we have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Is that from you, Mr. Coleman?
It is.
And would you like us to mark that?
Yes, there were 5 exhibits attached to the petition, so I would suggest we mark the PowerPoint presentation, and next in order is Exhibit 6.
Okay, and so what we will do is, for the record, we will mark each exhibit 1 through 5 as they appear in the petition, and then Exhibit 6 will be the PowerPoint presentation entitled Temecula Valley Regional Water Reclamation Facility Biogas Engines. Okay, and then I'm going to just ask anyone who will be testifying today and any member of the public who wishes to be heard today to please rise to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Okay, we'll begin with you, Mr. Coleman, for your opening.
Thank you. Eastern Municipal Water District provides wastewater treatment services to large portions of the Inland Empire. They have several facilities, wastewater treatment facilities in their service area. The one that we are concerned with today is their Temecula Valley Regional Wastewater Reclamation Facility. It has, as part of its wastewater treatment process, 3 internal combustion engines that are used to power aeration blowers that are a necessary part of the wastewater treatment process. One of those engines is fueled only by natural gas and does meet the requirements of Rule 1110.2. 2 of the engines are fueled on a combination of natural gas and digester gas, which is a byproduct of the sewage treatment process. Rule 1110.2 sets emission limits for gaseous-fueled internal combustion engines. And the district has long recognized that fuels such as gas generated by landfills or sewage digesters create problems for after-treatment because they have contaminants in them that can foul catalysts used to reduce NOx emissions. Due to these problems, biogas fuels, they generally, digester gas and landfill gas are considered biogas, just generically in the district's rules. And the biogas fuels have separate limits in Rule 1110.2, and engines fueled with biogas were allowed more time to comply with the limits in 1110.2. The district, along with a number of public agencies, including Eastern Municipal Water District, work together to try to develop cost-effective NOx reduction technologies for internal combustion engines fueled on biogas. And I think everyone going into this was hopeful that cost-effective NOx emission reductions could be proven and applied to internal combustion engines fueled on biogas, especially at the smaller scale treatment facilities such as the one operated by Eastern Municipal Water District. As I said, Eastern Municipal Water District was one of the entities and did cooperate with the SCAQMD on a number of projects designed to demonstrate the effectiveness of alternative NOx emission control technologies, as well as to demonstrate alternatives to internal combustion engines for electric generation, such as fuel cells. Unfortunately, after years of effort and hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent, one of the more promising control technologies, it's called Noxtech, could not reliably and consistently meet the NOx emission limits set by the district for biogas-fueled engines. So after the Noxtech demonstration program was determined to be unsuccessful, Eastern Municipal Water District had to determine the best way to meet the emission limits in Rule 1110.2 at the Temecula facility while maintaining reliability for the treatment process. Eastern has determined now that the best way forward, well, first of all, they contracted with a consultant to review the operations and come up with a comprehensive plan for dealing with you have to deal with digester gas. How to deal with digester gas? You have to, what is the best and most reliable way to assure that aeration will be provided to the treatment process? The consultant's recommendation came back in, and they recommended that the best way forward is to replace the internal combustion engines powering the aeration blowers with electric motors. So essentially, electrification will do away with any emissions from blower-related activities at the facility. And although Rule 1110.2 gave Eastern Municipal Water District, because it had participated in these demonstration projects, until January 1 of 2019 to meet the emission limits, due to complexities that will be explained by our witnesses, Eastern Municipal Water District needs additional time, actually, and we're projecting now until the end of June of 2020. We're hopeful it can be done sooner, but the projections now are that's what, the time it will take to complete the electrification project and remove the internal combustion engines. And the plan is to remove all three, even the one fueled on natural gas that meets the Rule 1110.2 limits. So all the aeration at the facility will be done by electric motor-driven blowers. Now, Eastern Municipal did explore an alternative compliance option that could have brought them into compliance with Rule 1110.2 in the interim pending the electrification. This would involve converting the two digester gas engines to operate only on natural gas, apply NOx controls to the engines, purchase additional natural gas, and then essentially waste the digester gas by flaring it. This option would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, or would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, would be in effect for 18 months at the most, and result in a net reduction in NOx emissions of 0.07 pounds per day, so less than 1/10 of a pound a day. And this is because you're burning the natural gas in the engines, but then you have to flare the digester gas. So it almost offsets any benefits you get from controlling the engines. In light of this situation, Eastern opened discussion with the district staff in March of this year regarding the possibility of an amendment to Rule 1110.2 that would provide them with more time to complete the electrification project. Staff had a number of internal discussions. We kept the lines of communication open, and then we had a meeting on May 3rd of this year. And the district staff, I think, agreed with Eastern that the electrification project was the preferred approach and recommended that the Eastern Municipal Water District petition the hearing board for a variance that would allow for the additional time to electrify the aeration blowers. We are here today to explain why this time is needed and demonstrate that Eastern Municipal Water District has been a leader in emission reduction technology and energy efficiency while maintaining reliable service to an ever-increasing population in its large service area. Indeed, these are the goals of this electrification project: reduce emissions and energy efficiency while not endangering reliability of service. Our witnesses, we have a number of witnesses, the two I'm planning on calling unless questions arise that others need to address. Our Assistant General Manager for Planning, Engineering, and Construction, Joe Muad. He will testify about the circumstances leading up to this variance request, essentially walk us through the PowerPoint presentation. And then Senior Air Quality Compliance Analyst Allison Torres will testify regarding the specifics concerning the existing engines, excess emissions, proposed conditions that we have worked out with the district, and certain other technical matters.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Ms. Pruitt, your opening.
Hello. Based upon the adoption of Rule 1110.2, the Eastern Municipal Water District is going to have to take steps to be in compliance with the district's rules. These steps will involve time, construction, and installation. They will be electrifying and should be electrified completely by June of 2020. They want to continue to use the biogas for a year and a half or 1.5 year, 6 months after their permit, and the district is not opposed.
I assume that will be explained half a year after their permit. That's something we haven't heard, but
The permit expires on January 1, 2019, and they're asking for actually a year and a half. Excuse me.
okay, I assume that the testimony will bear this out.
Actually, the rule itself specifies they need to be in compliance by January 1 of 2019, and so that's why we're seeking a variance from the rule.
That's what I understood from the petition. Is there something else with regard to the permit as well?
Well, the permit has conditions that require compliance with Rule 1110.2, and obviously then 3002 also requires requirement with the conditions in the Title V permit, so.
But that would be a variance from permit conditions, not
Right.
from an expired permit, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we understood that. Okay, Mr. Coleman, your first witness, please.
Yeah, call Joe Muad. Mr. Muad, will you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
Good morning, board members, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is, thank you. My name is Joe Muad. I am the Assistant General Manager of Planning, Engineering, and Construction at Eastern Municipal Water District.
And were you sworn as a witness a few moments ago?
Yes, I was.
And you understand you're testifying under oath?
Yes.
Yes, and can you spell your name?
Sure. Joe, last name is spelled M-O-U-A-W-A-D.
All right, and you understand you're testifying under oath?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How long have you held the position as the Assistant General Manager?
I've been at Eastern Municipal Water District for the last 12 years, and in my current role for 2 years.
Okay. Will you please describe what Eastern Municipal Water District is and what services it provides?
Sure. If it pleases the board, I do have a presentation that will cover our services and also the specifics relative to this variance request.
Okay, why don't you launch into that?
Great. Thank you. So in terms of Eastern Municipal Water District, we were established in 1950. We are a special district that serves approximately 816,000 people in Western Riverside County, providing water, wastewater, and recycled water services, including several disadvantaged communities within Western Riverside County. The exhibit that you see here on the slide indicates our service area, which extends from Moreno Valley in the north to Temecula in the south, Hemet San Jacinto in the east, and Paris and Meade Valley on the west side. We have, over the last 2 decades, implemented a number of renewable energy projects, including demonstration projects in coordination with South Coast SCAQMD, and we've also focused in the last several years on energy management programs. We do have a strategic plan that we have been implementing, which includes our mission to implement energy independence programs. And of course, our priority as well is to serve our community in an economical, safe, environmentally sustainable fashion. So as part of our energy management initiative, we have advanced and implemented a number of projects, including solar, biogas utilization, electrification, and natural gas utilization. Our objective is to provide energy efficiency, utilize renewable energy, provide energy diversity and reliability, and of course, operational flexibility. As I'll discuss further, we have initiated and implemented a number of solar installations. We've also installed fuel cells to utilize digester gas, as well as advanced, as Mr. Coleman indicated, a number of demonstration projects to test emerging technologies that will be helpful not only to Eastern's operations, but industry-wide. And we've also advanced a number of comprehensive beneficial use studies. So in terms of our renewable generation portfolio, as I mentioned, we have installed several solar facilities. In fact, we have 6 operational solar installations which generate approximately 5.5 megawatts of energy that support our operations, both our reclamation plants as well as our desalination facilities. We have also installed, over a decade ago, our first fuel cell system at the Moreno Valley Reclamation Plant, and subsequently we installed a second fuel cell facility at our Paris Reclamation Plant. Those facilities generate approximately 1.5 megawatts of energy in support of the treatment facilities. So in total, we currently generate about 7 megawatts of renewable energy on site. We also did receive recognition and award from the South Coast SCAQMD for our fuel cell installation at the Moreno Valley Reclamation Facility. In addition, we have recently initiated an expansion of our solar installations. We are currently preparing a solicitation to advance and implement an additional 14 megawatts of solar energy to support, again, our reclamation plants as well as our desalination facilities. In terms of biogas technology projects and demonstration facilities, over the last several years, we've invested significant time and effort to test and demonstrate available technologies that may be applicable, especially to facilities of our magnitude. We have 4 reclamation plants. They are of limited capacity, and we need to identify a viable and feasible technology that would apply to our size facilities. As I mentioned, we've installed 2 fuel cells at 2 of our reclamation plants at a cost of $12 million. Although they have been operational for the last many years, but we have had a number of operational challenges, a number of shutdowns. So we continue to work with the manufacturer to make certain that those facilities remain in operation. We've also invested more than $2 million and a significant amount of staff time to demonstrate the Noxtech technology over the last 4 years. Unfortunately, as Mr. Coleman indicated, the results were unsatisfactory, and we have decided to pursue a different course in utilizing renewable gas resources. In addition, we've partnered with a gas company to demonstrate TECOGEN technology for biogas engines, which does require extensive pretreatment, but the results have been very favorable, and we have decided to implement utilization of the TECOGEN on a going forward basis. We've also are looking at partnering with other entities for utilization and beneficial use of our biogas. Upon the results of both the Noxtech as well as the TECOGEN demonstration project results, we immediately turned around and retained a consultant to help us understand our long-term strategy for digester gas beneficial reuse. That study was initiated in 2016, and the objective was to identify the appropriate long-term solution for utilization of biogas, as well as provide us a roadmap that would allow us to implement the solutions. We also looked at the concept of treating the gas and selling the gas on the renewable markets by injecting the gas into the gas company's pipeline. We also looked at various solutions, including the potential, as Mr. Coleman indicated, to flare the gas in the interim until we have implemented a solution. So our guiding document for utilization of our renewables is our energy management plan, which was completed a couple of years ago. And within that plan, it identifies a strategy to reduce the number of operational internal combustion engines. As indicated here in the graph, in 2012, we had 62 IC engines in operation. Currently, we have 46. We have systematically been reducing the number of permitted IC engines and electrifying, essentially, those units. We will continue to do so, and our plan is to ultimately convert several IC engines with the resultant to have only 27 in operation. So, as I mentioned, we've initiated and implemented a number of renewable energy projects over the last few decades. We started back in 2007 with implementation of fuel cells, and even before then, we had boilers that were utilizing digester gas at our treatment facilities, and we had IC engines utilizing digester gas. So we've been utilizing renewables for a very long time. In 2007, we installed our first fuel cell at the Moreno Valley facility. In 2008, we installed our fuel cell at the Paris plant, as well as converted a boiler for utilization of digester gas. Subsequently, we installed solar at our headquarters. And after that, we completed in 2014 our energy management plan that has been our guiding document to implement additional projects and initiatives. In 2014, we installed 5 additional solar facilities throughout our reclamation plants and desalination facilities. Subsequently, we initiated, in coordination with SCAQMD, our Noxtech biogas demo project, which was completed in January 2016. Unfortunately, it was not successful. However, with the TECOGEN biogas demo, which was also completed mid-2016, we did yield very favorable results, and we continue to plan to utilize that technology. As I mentioned, we are continuing with the expansion of our solar generation facilities, and we plan to add another 14 megawatts of solar generation systems. In addition, we continue to electrify various engines, and that is an ongoing program at the district. As I indicated earlier, upon the results of the TECOGEN and Noxtech biogas demo projects, we retained Hazen Sawyer and Associates, our consultants, to help us, guide us to identify the long-term digester gas beneficial use plan. And as part of that, we are planning to electrify the 2 engines, or actually the 3 engines that are currently operational at the Temecula Valley Reclamation Facility. Over the last many years, in totality, we've invested over $65 million in biogas utilization and energy projects. In terms of the internal combustion engines at the Temecula Valley Reclamation Facility, as indicated previously, there's one engine that's 465 horsepower Caterpillar engine operating on natural gas that is currently compliant, and there's 2 engines, 530 horsepower Waukesha engines operating on a blend of digester gas and natural gas. These are lean burn engines. These engines provide the necessary air for the wastewater treatment facility. And as you are aware, the oxygen in a wastewater plant is necessary to break down the organic compounds and nutrients, and essentially the oxygen provides the necessary support for the microorganisms. It removes carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and oxidizes the dissolved metals such as iron. Ultimately, this is a key and critical component of meeting our permit requirements for the wastewater plant. So that's a significant consideration, is that we have to operate these facilities 24/7 to treat the wastewater. I'm not going to go through this entire schematic, but I wanted to illustrate this is our wastewater facility at Temecula. We have 3 plants, 2 operational, and the 3rd currently under construction. That's plant number 3. That contract is a $78 million contract that is scheduled to be completed by mid next year. The aeration facilities are in the heart of our treatment plant, as identified there in the boxes. That's what the air from these engines is utilized for, is to be able to treat the wastewater and break down the nutrients accordingly. The reason Plant 3 is important here is because Plant 3 construction, which is scheduled to be completed by mid next year, will provide us a new service from Edison, a 33 kilovolt service, including a significant size substation. That additional electric service is needed to be able to electrify the engines that I just discussed. So I mentioned our unsuccessful effort with Noxtech. As the board is aware, this is a technology that was previously identified by AQMD as potentially a cost-effective solution. We did conduct the test at the Temecula facility in close coordination and cooperation with the South Coast AQMD Technology Advancement Office. That effort took several years. Unfortunately, it only yielded a success rate or compliance rate of 52%, which for our purposes, again, as an operating wastewater facility with 100% compliance requirement, is not satisfactory. We need to be able to utilize a reliable and demonstrated technology for treatment of our wastewater, and thus that's the reason we're here today, is to request this variance to allow us to electrify these engines at the plant. So we have initiated the project to electrify the blowers and to replace the 3 engines with electric motors. This effort will further reduce our the number of permitted IC engines in the district, as well as obviously the air emissions. We have looked at ways to fast-track implementation of this project, including pre-negotiation to acquire the blower system. We're also talking about compressing the construction schedule, and we've also talked to our consultant about advancing and accelerating the design schedule so we can get this project completed as quickly as possible. As I mentioned earlier, in order to be able to electrify the engines, we need the Edison service, which is part of the overall expansion of this facility. That project, the expansion project, is scheduled to be completed by summer of 2019. Part of this electrification, the acquisition of the equipment as well as the installation, ultimately it will cost $13 million. That project has already been included as part of our capital improvement program, and our board has supported the advancement and implementation of this effort. We are planning to have the electrification project completed and operational by June 30th, 2020. In terms of timeline, we've already completed the preliminary design for the electrification of the Temecula plant. That was completed in March of 2018. We approached our board of directors, and they have authorized us to advance the final design, and that was approved in April of this year. We are planning to complete the design by February 2019. We will publicly advertise the project as required by Public Contracts Code, and that project award is planned to be completed by May of next year, and we will proceed to construction with a completion of the facilities by June 2020. And then, of course, as part of that project completion, the IC engines will be removed from service. So why are we here today? Again, the project requires significant improvements to the reclamation plant. It's not only the actual mechanical, electrical motors, it's having the design completed that we'll take a look at the electrical system at the plant, at the control system, the SCADA control facilities. There's integration of those systems as part of the new improvements. So there is a significant effort to provide those design details and ultimately to implement and construct those necessary improvements. The end result will be to remove all 3 primary internal combustion engines and replace those with electric motors. As I mentioned, we will have those removed by June 30th, 2020. So we are seeking the board's approval for a variance to provide EMWD with a relief until such date. And we do appreciate your consideration. I think Allison can do that. Okay, that's fine. So, in closing, we do appreciate your consideration of our variance request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Coleman, do you have any other questions for Mr. Muwad?
No, I just would like to point out that we will be presenting some additional information regarding the constraints at the facility that affect the the construction schedule as well. And Ms. Torres will be speaking about that.
And as to other of the 6 findings, including the rules,
Yes, she will be addressing that.
okay, so not Mr. Mawad. Okay, thank you. Ms. Pruitt, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Board members? I see Mr. Camarena.
Thank you. The Noxtech project ended January of 2016. Surely before it ended, you were already thinking that this is not going to work. From the time that the project ended to today, about 29 months have elapsed. But I see that it was only, well, I guess the question is, when did you decide to move with the electrification project?
Sure. So you are correct, Mr. Camarena. We did complete the Noxtech in January 2016. We also wanted to complete the demonstration project for the TECOGEN, and that was completed later in 2016. Fortunately, that was a successful demonstration project. We wanted to have the results from both technology demonstration projects to be able to advance a plan to look at the long-term utilization of the biogas. So as soon as we had the results from both, we issued a request for proposal that ultimately allowed us to retain our consultant, Hazen Sawyer, which developed the digester gas beneficial use plan. That took about a year to complete. That study was completed in 2017, and that study ultimately identified the various options that we had for use of the biogas, with the preferred option to electrify at the Temecula plant. We were not only looking at the Temecula plant, long-term plan, but we're also looking at our other 3 facilities, our San Jacinto plant, our Paris plant, and our Marino plant. And this was a long-term plan to utilize the biogas. So we needed to have that strategy nailed down before we can advance a construction project at the facility.
And this other project, the TECOGEN,
Yes.
the results of that will be used on your other IC engines, the 27 that you expect will remain?
Yes. In fact, we currently have TECOGEN installed on several of our engines. What I did not discuss is that for Temecula, as part of the electrification project and related to that project, we also are advancing a separate project to utilize the biogas at other existing engines. Those engines are for our effluent pump station. They are not as critical of a facility as the aeration system at the wastewater plant. So we are planning to advance a project to provide the proper pretreatment for the biogas and use that biogas at the tertiary effluent pump station with the installation of the TECOGEN equipment.
Regarding the Edison project to provide the electricity, I think you told us that that's expected to be completed by summer 2019.
Yes.
Do you see any roadblocks along the way?
No, not currently. We issued the contract, the construction contract for the plant expansion in 2015. So this is a major construction project that has been ongoing for 3 years. It basically consists of expanding that reclamation plant capacity by another 5 million gallons per day treatment capacity. That major expansion triggered the need to provide the additional electric service to be able to power the equipment at the expanded facility. But currently, we've been working with Edison. We've installed the conduits. There's not only on-site conduits that have to be installed, as well as a major substation to convert the 33 kV power supply, but there's also off-site facilities to be able to bring in the power to the plant. That work is substantially underway, and we don't anticipate any issues in having it completed by mid-next year.
You mentioned a cost of $13 million. What was that for?
That is for the electrification project to convert the 3 IC engines to electrical motors. That obviously includes not only the purchase of the additional blowers, the 3 blowers, but also the electrical systems that need to be installed, the control systems that have to be installed, the piping, the yard piping associated with the aeration line, the modifications. So it's all those improvements at the Temecula plant that are necessary to convert the internal combustion engines to electric motors.
How will you handle outages once you're electrified?
We have backup power generators, so that the project does include an additional diesel-powered emergency generator for the facility.
Thank you.
Ms. Byrd?
The TICO-Gen, was that also recommended by the district as a?
At the time, it was I'm sorry, maybe Allison is correcting me here. TicoGen was not identified?
I can wait.
Yes, if you
I can
don't,
wait.
if you don't know
yeah.
the answer to any question, just say you don't know.
Okay. And then I believe I was reading in either the presentation or the petition that the manufacturer had given you a guarantee on the Noxtech. Was that correct? That you could meet the limits?
There were certain assurances provided by the manufacturer. Unfortunately, again, we were only 52% compliant, and to us, that is not a rate that provides the sufficient reliability and consistency that we need for our wastewater facility.
And understandable. I just wanted to, that was their intent, though,
Yes,
that
it
they
was.
could help you to meet that. Okay. Let's see. And the TicoGen, I'm sorry, you said you would be using it at a facility?
Yes, we will. In fact, TicoGen has already been installed at other engines that we have currently operational, including an engine at the Moreno Valley Reclamation Facility.
Where you don't need as much power?
In that case, at the Moreno Valley, we have a fuel cell facility, and the fuel cell requires digester gas treatment equipment. So we have already the fuel treatment skid at the Moreno Valley plant. So we're actually using digester gas to power that particular engine, but we have the TicoGen installed to be able to meet the emissions requirements.
Okay, thank you.
So the study that was conducted by your consultant was completed in 2017, is that correct? When in 2017?
It was completed in November of 2017.
Okay. And was it begun, how far after January of 2016, when the original project was deemed a failure? When did the study begin?
So we, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to see the results not only from the Noxtech, but as well as the TicoGen demonstration facilities. Those were both completed, I believe the TicoGen was completed in May 2016. Upon that completion of that effort, we prepared a request for proposals to be able to solicit proposals from various engineering firms. And ultimately, we retained Hayes & Sawyer, I believe in the fall of 2016. And that study was initiated, and it took approximately about a year to complete.
And then when when the study was completed in November 2017, how long after did you commence designing?
So we commenced the preliminary design immediately after. Ultimately, we had to go back and negotiate a detailed scope of work for the design services beyond preliminary design, and that contract was awarded by our board of directors in April of 2018.
Was there at any time, was there any consideration of the looming deadline in Rule 1110.2 to hasten any approvals by the board, or was there any thought as to expediting things?
Yes, absolutely. there's several things we did. One is we did approach the South Coast SCAQMD staff earlier this year to talk about the different options that we had. One is, as mentioned by Mr. Coleman, was to convert the existing IC engines that were non-compliant to natural gas. The challenge with that is, in addition to costing several $100,000, that would only be of benefit for about a year and a half until the electrification is completed. So we would end up having to expend several $100,000 to convert these engines to natural gas with very little use and benefit, especially that we would have to be flaring the digester gas during that period of time.
Understood, but that's the alternative to achieving or requesting and getting a variance to just simply wait and use the engines that you currently have. I'm wondering about, so I want to understand what's occurring between, you've laid out what's occurring. So 2017, November, the study is completed. You say you immediately commenced preliminary designs, but it wasn't until April 2018 that there was this new contract that was awarded by the board. And so I'm trying to understand what efforts are being made to expedite things so that in consideration of the deadline in the rule.
Absolutely. So we are planning to pre-negotiate procurement of the blowers, the electric blowers that are needed for this project. What that will allow us to do is by pre-negotiating them outside of the construction contract, the construction contractor then does not have to wait for a purchase order to be able to initiate the procurement. Essentially, we're looking at the critical path schedule to be able to complete the project, and we are looking at removing any obstacles along that critical path. One of the main critical path items we see is actual procurement of the equipment. So what we have decided to do is to go ahead and pre-negotiate with a sole source vendor to acquire that equipment and start the fabrication process. The fabrication process does take quite a bit of time. So in lieu of waiting for the construction contractor to be selected, we are planning to initiate the shop drawing review, shop drawing approval right now, get in the queue for fabrication so that we can acquire those blowers in the quickest manner possible. We have also compressed the design schedule. As I mentioned before, we were able to embark on the design schedule. We had to complete preliminary design. We had to understand what the extent of the improvements are necessary. We had to understand what the schedule requirements are, what the critical path is, what the cost is of $13 million. To do that, to be able to define what the project is, we immediately advanced a preliminary design. Once we had a solution defined through the preliminary design, we were able to then go back to our board and request approval of the detailed design. And that is already underway and progressing. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, in the final design, so the contracts for the final design or the board approval to move forward with the final design was in April.
Yes.
And is the final design, when is that complete?
It will be complete in February 2019.
Oh, okay, of the final design, yes. Okay. And then at that point, procurement will occur?
Pre-negotiation will have been initiated for the blowers, and we will advertise the construction project separately from the pre-negotiation of the equipment.
Can you speak to, are you someone who can speak to the notice of violation that is Exhibit 3?
Yes, Ms. Torres will address that.
Okay. And I'll hold it for Ms. Torres, but I'm perplexed, and perhaps it's a typo in my version of Rule 1110.2. D, what is it? D something F? D1F, but mine says 2018, January 1st, 2018. So I'm trying to understand where the 2019 comes from. Perhaps it's a typo. But if someone can address that at some point.
My understanding is that the original compliance date was January 1 of 2017, but for facilities that, or operators that had participated in a demonstration project of new or emerging technologies, they could have until January 1 of 2019.
My version says, for the city of San Bernardino, Orange County Sanitation District, and Eastern Municipal Water District that commenced and implemented technology demonstration projects prior to January 1st, 2015, all their biogas engines shall have until January 1st, 2018 to comply with the requirements of Table 3B.
Right, but then there's subparagraph H,
Okay.
alternate compliance option that allows for a one-year extension of that,
Okay, so that's, that,
up to a one-year extension.
so that is
Yeah.
subparagraph general, little h?
Yes,
Okay.
it's, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions for Senator? Do you have questions?
The notice of violation was issued January 2016, and it just released again by the district October 6, 2017. It was discovered in 2016. Notice of violation was not issued until 2017. So my question is, and then the permit was issued December 5, 2017. So if you got a permit to operate, and yet you were in violation to the permit before it was issued, maybe I need to understand that.
I believe Ms. Torres can answer those questions.
Can I answer them now or after?
No, just, we
yeah,
aren't
just
quite
wait.
done yet.
I believe that I have a witness here who can answer this question for you.
Okay, so we will defer the questions to the appropriate witness on either
I'll
side.
forget the question later on.
We'll remember.
Thank you. When did you know or learn that you would not be in compliance with 1110.2?
Upon the conclusion of the, both the TECOGEN demonstration as well as the Noxtech, the unsuccessful Noxtech, I think we came to the realization in 2016, in mid-2016, that we may not be able to comply with Rule 1110.2 at the Temecula facility.
Somewhere I think it said yes, you worked on this Noxtech project for 4 years.
That's correct.
So you had some idea that you would have to be in compliance with 1110.2.
Our objective was to have a successful demonstration project. We invested significant time and effort to see if that technology would be successful. Unfortunately, after 4 years of work, trying to make it work, we came to the realization that it didn't have the reliability that was needed for a reclamation facility.
It also, in your impact of the demonstration on your diagram here, it says that the SCAQMD said that the technology was available at a cost-effective amount to prove this would be a worthwhile project. Did AQMD give you any data on this, any testing data?
That was the purpose of the demo. That was the purpose of the demonstration project.
Did AQMD indicate by data, test results, that this would be a worthwhile project to embark on?
I don't believe that AQMD provided any kind of data. In fact, we were working closely with the AQMD's team to provide the data results from that demo. It was simply identified as a possible technology that may be successful, and we took upon ourselves to invest in testing it.
So AQMD led you in that direction?
It was one of the recommended technologies to be evaluated, yes.
4 years.
Yes.
You got 52% compliance.
That's correct.
So therefore, it was inconsequential.
That,
The net effect.
The net effect is it's not a reliable technology for us.
That's right, it wouldn't do the job. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Lerner?
I think we're all a little troubled, at least I am, about the duration of the study. Was it designed to go 4 years, or did you just keep on edging forward because you thought, well, maybe it'll work, maybe it'll work, maybe it'll work? Was this really an open-ended thing?
We did try on several occasions to be successful with the technology. You are correct that we wanted to exhaust all possibilities to make the technology work. We initially tested the technology on natural gas engines, and that yielded promising results. However, when we relocated the equipment down to Temecula and we tested the equipment on digester gas, that was not reliable. So you're correct. We did make several attempts. Our objective was to be successful. We did not plan for the demonstration project to extend for that long, but we wanted to exhaust all efforts before we abandoned the technology.
Thank you.
Senator?
It seems to me that AQMD led you in that direction, and you wanted to follow the instructions just in case it didn't work or show that it wouldn't work, then you could justify that it's not a viable alternative. Would that be the case?
We were working closely with AQMD on the technology. This was an identified technology that potentially had a significant potential, not only to assist us in compliance, but to assist others in the industry. There are other agencies who have also tested different technologies. This was something that we wanted to test out because we felt it could be a viable solution for the mid-size treatment facilities that we operated. So as I mentioned earlier, we invested $2 million in significant staff time to test it. But you are correct, Senator. This technology was previously identified as a possible viable technology by AQMD. We're frustrated that it didn't work, but we have decided to move on and implement a solution accordingly.
You converted to electrical, all these engines, not right?
That is the proposed plan.
That's what's being proposed.
That is correct, Senator.
You think is it going to work?
Yes, absolutely.
How much time did it take for you to determine that that would be an alternative way of resolving this problem, 1110.2?
We initiated the study to look at the long-term solution for biogas in 2016 after the demonstration projects, and that study took approximately 1 year to complete. So in November 2017, we completed that study. That provided us the roadmap to implement the electrification at the Temecula.
How much money was spent in that study?
I don't recall, Senator, but it was, I believe, several $100,000.
Less than what it was on biotech, or Noxtech.
That was for the study with Hayes and Sawyer to look at the long-term beneficial use of biogas for Temecula and the other reclamation facilities. The Noxtech itself, that demonstration project cost approximately $2 million.
So more than, and more time.
Yes.
They ran the clock. All right, thank you.
Anyone else have questions for this witness?
I have some redirect.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
So just to clarify things, the biogas utilization report was completed in November of 2017. And did you then immediately take the results of that and begin work on a preliminary design to implement the recommendations?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Now, did that report look at both Tecogen and electrification as potential ways to address the Rule 1110.2 issue?
Yes, among other possible options, including we looked at CNG for our fleet. We also looked at treating the gas and injecting it into the gas company's pipeline. We looked at a number of alternatives, including Tecogen and electrification. That's correct.
Was there a problem, well, let me ask this, could Tecogen have been implemented more quickly than electrification?
No. The electrification is dependent upon a number of things. One of them is we need an expanded service from Edison for the plant, for the additional load.
Okay, I'm just, is there also an issue with Tecogen about there are so many parts of the system between the gas treatment and the motors and the blowers that it could be more failure prone?
Well, Tecogen by itself, the equipment, will not work without the digester gas fuel treatment skid that has to also be installed. It cannot be installed by itself and be successful. You have to treat the digester gas, you have to clean the digester gas, and that treated digester gas is then utilized through the IC engines, and then of course the Tecogen addresses the emissions component. But it all goes hand in hand. You're correct. It's not just a one piece of equipment that will solve the issue.
Was a determination made that the electrification would result not only in lower emissions but a more reliable system?
Yes, that was a key consideration in our findings.
Okay. And just to clarify, is there sufficient electrical capacity currently at the facility to electrify, to install electric motors to replace the existing IC engines?
With the completion of the plant expansion scheduled to be operational by summer of 2019, there will be the additional power supply from Edison to be able to electrify the engines.
But there's not capacity now to do that?
No, there is not.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Muad? Thank you. Mr. Coleman, your next witness, please.
Yes, I'll call Allison Torres. Ms. Torres, please state your name and spell your name for the record.
Allison Torres, first name Alison, last name Torres.
And were you sworn as a witness earlier this morning?
Yes,
You understand you're testifying under oath?
yes.
And what is your position with Eastern Municipal Water District?
I'm the Senior Air Quality Compliance Analyst for our Environmental Services Division.
And how long have you held that position?
I have been the senior for approximately 5 years. I've been an air analyst with the district for approximately 12 years.
And have you reviewed the petition for variance that was filed in this manner?
Yes,
And are the matters stated in that petition true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
yes.
And what type of equipment is involved in this variance request?
We're requesting variance relief to allow the operation of 2 internal combustion engines fueled on a digester gas, natural gas mixture, pending their replacement by electric motors. The engines are needed to power aeration blowers necessary for the treatment of wastewater coming into the facility.
And is this equipment operated pursuant to permits to operate issued by the SCAQMD?
Yes, the permits are operated pursuant to permits to operate G34165 and G49206. The wastewater treatment process is operated pursuant to permit to construct / temporary permit to operate G52578 with application number 597065.
Are true and correct copies of those permits attached to the variance petition?
Yes, the engine permits are in Exhibits 1 and 2.
And is this facility a Title V facility?
Yes, it is.
So is the permit reissued from time to time? Are the permits reissued from time to time or updated?
Yes, whenever there's a revision to any piece of equipment that's included in the Title V permit, the whole permit section is reissued with a new date.
But the permits that are attached to the petition accurately reflect the description and conditions that are applicable to the engines we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. I show you a document entitled Temecula Valley Regional Water Reclamation Facility, existing Plant 1 and Plant 2 blower building. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that a true and accurate depiction of the inside of the Plant 1 and Plant 2 blower building?
Yes.
Excuse me,
And-
we're just going to mark
Oh,
it.
yes.
We're going to mark, as described by Mr. Coleman, will be exhibit number 7. Thank you.
Thank you. And does this show the 3 engines that are in that, that power the aeration blowers?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there's been some discussion earlier about an alternative compliance method that you investigated. Could you just go over the details of that? So, and what it would involve, what the costs were, and what the savings in emissions, if any, would be if that was pursued?
Sure. So we evaluated the option to convert the 2 biogas engines to operate on natural gas fuel only. These engines are currently lean burn engines, so that would involve a conversion to rich burn, so that NOx controls can be installed on the engines. So this conversion these engines would operate for a period until electrification could be complete. However, the temporary conversion of the engines to natural gas only would cost approximately $325,000 plus an additional $13,500 a month in purchased natural gas to still support the aeration process. And in addition to that, all the digester gas would then have to be flared. The net impact in terms of the air emissions would be a reduction in NOx emissions of 0.07 pounds per day is what we estimate. This is because the digester gas would still have to be combusted in flare, and the emissions from that flaring operation, when added to the NOx emissions from the 2 engines operating on natural gas, make up almost all the gains from installing the controls.
Can you repeat that last part?
I'm sorry. Let me just repeat that. So the net impact in terms of air emissions that we estimate would be a reduction in NOx emissions of approximately 0.07 pounds per day. This is because the NOx emissions from the 2 engines, the digester gas would still have to be combusted in the flare, and there's emissions associated with that activity. And when you add those emissions to the continued NOx emissions from the engines on natural gas that are compliant with 1110.2, that net difference make up almost all the gains from installing the controls and converting the engines. because we would still need to operate them to support the aeration process. So incurring the additional costs will result in a negative impact to our customers and disadvantage the communities served by EMWD due to the cost of such a temporary operation. We believe this constitutes an unreasonable burden on an essential public service compared to the minimal reductions in emissions. Once the electrification is complete, there will be zero NOx emissions from the blower engines. All 3 engines, including the 2 biogas engines and the existing natural gas only engine, will be permanently shut down.
What rule or rules is EMWD violating under current operating conditions?
Currently, we're not in violation of any rules. However, if the 2 engines that are subject to the variance are not shut down or converted to natural gas firing with the NOx emission controls by January 1, 2019, then we'll be in violation of the provisions of Rule 1110.2 and the permit conditions identified in the petition.
And that is paragraph 9 of the petition, where the conditions and potential rule violations are listed.
Yes.
Okay.
Petition.
Can you please describe why you believe it will take through June of 2020 to complete the electrification project?
Just continuing on from the discussion from Joe's testimony, the electrification project requires careful planning, design, and construction, especially since there is a large multi-year expansion currently in construction at this facility. EMWD has a design firm that's working on the final design of the blower electrification project. And this design and the bid and spec review period is estimated to be completed by January 29, 2019. The project will then go through the public bidding process. We anticipate the contractor selection and contractor award to be approved by EMWD's Board of Directors by May 31st, 2019. At that point, the contractor will then have the notice to proceed, and they will initiate construction activities. Before the start of on-site construction, there will be a pre-job meeting and some initial submittal reviews and field investigative work that will occur in cooperation with EMWD's construction administration team. However, in order to minimize any unplanned circumstances during the construction phase, although we are trying to condense the schedule to the extent possible, we can't rush the design. There's several considerations that are required during the design and construction phase. I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. I show you, are some of the issues involve, site-specific constraints?
Yes.
Okay. I show you.
I need a magnifying glass.
Request this be marked as Exhibit 8.
We've received an overhead aerial photograph entitled Temecula Valley Regional Water Reclamation Facility, and it will be marked as Exhibit number 8.
Could you describe what this aerial photo depicts?
This is an aerial photo of our Temecula Valley Regional Water Reclamation Facility. You'll see in this photo that there is not a lot of usable space. It's a pretty condensed facility, and there are this image is I think from about June, so you'll see that some of the construction activity has been completed. However, it is still in progress. Additionally, you'll see on the southern portion of the aerial the location of the new 33 kV substation where the new service from SCE will enter the facility.
Is that the yellow pin?
Yes, the yellow pin on the bottom portion of the aerial. And then also you will see on the northern part where the green pin is, that is the existing plant 1 and 2 aeration blower building, which is the location of these 3 engines. And just below that are the aeration, the plant 1 to the left and the plant 2 to the right would be the aeration basins. Those are those rectangular shapes there in the aerial, which is the process that the blowers supply the air to. So, did you want me?
Yeah, why don't you now talk about the considerations involved in phasing in this electrification?
Okay, so the electrical and instrumentation of the blower building, as mentioned previously by Joe, does need to be upgraded to accommodate the additional electrical load of the new blowers. This blower electrification project extends the distribution of power to locations that currently lack infrastructure to support the electrification, being that the power supply needs to be upgraded from that new 33 kV substation and primary service over to the new building. In addition, the instrumentation and controls within the building need to be connected to that new power supply.
Just to clarify here, I think what you're saying is your current electrical infrastructure could not support the electrification project.
That is correct.
Okay.
Some additional considerations in the design and construction. The facility, as mentioned previously, does perform a critical function, so the aeration cannot be shut down or the plant could be shut down. So we need to ensure that there's sufficient air supply that's available to the plant 1 and plant 2 aeration basins, which I mentioned are those rectangular shapes just below the green pin, during the installation of the new electric motors. Since this process can't be shut down, another important consideration is the sequencing of construction. We need to carefully plan to ensure that that supply is not interrupted during the installation of the new electric blowers and during the removal of the engines. Lastly, the new electric blowers and will also require additional standby power. A new standby generator will be part of this electrification project. However, it is a long lead item for purchase, so it could take the contractor up to 10 months to procure. But in order to,
I'm sorry, one moment. I don't know if the senator had a clarification.
I'm sorry.
As you walk through this diagram,
Yes.
schematic, it'd have been easy for me to digest it if you were pointing to these, on the point you're pointing to.
Okay.
We could do that if that would be all right. If you
Yeah,
just
me,
step
that's what
over
you-
to here and we can assist you. You'll see,
Otherwise, it's just words.
Yeah, no, I understand.
okay, so right over there on the green, you should be able to position it and see it come up on the screen. And then if you don't mind, I know it might be a little more difficult, but if you could turn on that microphone and then position it towards you, that would be, and speak into that.
See this okay even with the glare?
Plant 1, plant 2.
Is the microphone on?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. So if you could just speak directly into it.
Here. Okay.
Thank you.
So here is the plant 1 and 2 aeration, existing aeration blower building. This is the plant 1 aeration basin. So the air supply is provided by the aeration blowers in this building to plant 1 as well as plant 2, which is just next to it. The new plant 3 construction and process train is here. The lighting is kind of odd here. I hope you can see that okay. And then, as I mentioned, the 33 kV substation is down here in the yellow pin area. So the improved electrical and instrumentation tie-ins need to take place here in the blower building. Does that help explain it a little better?
Generally, just explain the operation in that process once again.
So Mr. S may sit down, right? I think now
No, she's
we're
gonna-
oriented.
Tell us how it works.
If you, I'd like to defer that to maybe our operations group to give a more, I mean, I can give you a general, but I would like to defer that to another witness.
That will be fine. Ms. Torres, you may sit back down. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I think you were talking about the expediting the
Oh, yes, so.
emergency standby power and blowers.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, a standby diesel generator will be part of this to support the added electrical motors. Since generators are typically a long lead item, we are going to expedite the procurement, and that will allow us to start the AQMD permitting process by pre-negotiating and sole sourcing the generator as well as the electric blowers and motors. One other thing I'd like to mention is that this facility was constructed several decades ago, has had several different expansions, and as mentioned previously, it is kind of condensed. So there's limited space, therefore there's a lot of utilities and infrastructure in this property, and despite attempts to carefully prepare and design and plan for those, sometimes unexpected discoveries occur during construction. So we must include some additional time in the project schedule, just a little buffer to accommodate for those unexpected items. So for the reasons just stated, we currently project that we'll need until June 30th, 2020 to commission the new electric blowers and remove the blower engines from the facility.
Okay. Now, have you prepared a schedule of increments of progress that the hearing board could incorporate in
Yes.
the, and I have them, here we go.
And just for clarity, because I was actually looking for those increments of progress, you are requesting that the variance would begin January 2019, correct? Because that is the date in which you would need to be in compliance.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Request this be marked as Exhibit 9.
We received a document entitled Temecula Valley Regional Water Reclamation Facility Increments of Progress, and we will mark that as Exhibit number 9.
And is this schedule of increments of progress consistent with the,
Thank you.
with your, with the project timeline as far as you are, can pin it down today?
Yes.
Now, has Eastern Municipal Water District met with the AQMD staff regarding the need for more time to complete the aeration blower electrification project?
Yes, we approached rulemaking staff in March and regarding this issue and requesting staff support for a potential amendment of Rule 1110.2 to allow additional time past the January 1, 2019 date. Rule 1110.2 is currently on the rulemaking calendar for this year as part of the Reclaim transition process. So we met again after, kind of had some open communication, and we met again with staff on May 3rd with senior staff, and at that time they suggested that we petition for a variance.
Have you, have you discussed variance conditions with the district staff?
Yes.
Did we actually have a exchange of, or discussion yesterday afternoon to try to finalize proposed conditions.
Yes, we did.
And were we successful, to your knowledge, in doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Want me to introduce them, or do you want to do it? Okay. Have a paper explosion here. Here we go. These are the ones, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it appears so.
Mr. Coleman, were these proposed by the Water District or the AQMD, and whose should we mark them as?
They were proposed by the district staff, and we went back and forth with a few minor tweaks and clarifications. They're largely as proposed by district staff.
So should I mark them as Exhibit A for the district?
Yes.
Okay, so we will mark proposed variance conditions as Exhibit A for the district.
So, Ms. Torres, have you reviewed those conditions?
I have.
And are they
a couple right now, but-
acceptable to Eastern Municipal Water District?
Yes.
Has Eastern Municipal Water District considered curtailing operations in lieu of obtaining a variance?
Unfortunately, we cannot curtail operations because the wastewater facility does operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It continuously receives sewage from our surrounding communities, and we cannot control the amount of sewage that comes in and at what time it comes in.
Will you reduce excess emissions to the minimum amount possible, or maximum extent possible?
Yeah, we normally operate the Rule 1110.2 compliant natural gas engine to the maximum extent feasible and supplement aeration requirements by the using one of the digester gas biogas engines. We'll continue to implement this operational strategy to the extent feasible during the variance.
And how do you plan to achieve compliance with the Rule 1110.2 and permit requirements?
We will replace the two digester gas engines with electric motors, and also, even though the third engine fired on only natural gas is 1110.2 compliant, we are also replacing that with an electric motor.
In the petition, you indicated that you had received a notice of violation pertaining to this equipment. Can you please describe what the non-compliance issues were?
Yes, the NOV, which is P61124, was issued for basically all deviations at the facility in the 2016 and 2017 Title V certification reports that were submitted to the district as part of our reporting, our required Title V reporting. A copy is included in Exhibit 3, and there are no outstanding compliance issues related to this NOV. There are issues that were corrected and reported as deviations in our Title V report, and because of the Title V status and Rule 3002, continuous compliance is required at all times, so the district can cite for any deviations.
So in essence, these were sort of one-off deviations that have been corrected?
Yes, they've all been corrected.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I ask just a clarifying question about the NOV? The date of the NOV was in 2017, but it was backdated to January 1st, 2016, and is that for the reason you just stated, that it was for the entire year's Title V compliance
That is
deviations?
correct. We received the NOV from the district in, I believe, October 2017, and they backdated it to the beginning of the certification report year
Thank you.
of 2016.
What would be the effect on Eastern Municipal Water District, its customers, and the public if this variance is not granted?
EMWD will be liable for civil penalties for violation of District Rules 203, 1110.2, and Rule 3002. If the engines cannot be operated, then the wastewater treatment system will be unable to properly process and treat the incoming wastewater to discharge standards, and that will result in a public health and safety issues.
Do you expect any excess emissions during the variance period?
We've estimated the excess emissions of 12.29 pounds per day of NOx, 3.02 pounds per day of VOCs, and 2.48 pounds per day of CO. And as indicated earlier, our alternative compliance option of temporarily converting the engines to natural gas and installing controls and flaring all the gas would result in a 0.07 pounds per day of NOx net difference. The first calculation of excess emissions does not take into consideration the fact that the gas still needs to be combusted in the flare, and it only looks at the difference between the permit limits and the 1110.2 limits that are effective January 1, 2019.
Did you perform a calculation of excess emissions that is included in Exhibit 4 to the petition?
Yes.
Okay. Will you be able to quantify the emissions from the two engines, the two biogas engines or the digester gas engines during the variance period?
Yes, we'll still implement the required 1110.2 emissions monitoring for operations, and then also for daily fuel flow tracking, we'll be able to utilize the emission factors and the fuel flow to calculate the excess emissions.
And one of the conditions that the district staff had requested was to monitor emissions and make reports to the district available. Is that correct?
Yes.
So just to clarify, for what period of time are you requesting this variance? When would you expect it to start, and when do you expect to be in compliance?
We expect it to start at the effective date of the 1110.2 limits, which is January 1, 2019, and continue through June 30th, 2020, when the engines are removed and the electric motors are installed.
At this point, I just request all the exhibits be entered into evidence.
Ms. Pruitt, when you, the request was to admit all of the exhibits into evidence. Do you have any objections?
No objection.
Okay, they are all admitted into evidence, 1 through, what do we have? 9, thank you. 1 through 9, and Exhibit A, just, well, we can wait for the district to move that in. I don't think it's evidence.
I have no further questions of Ms. Torres at this time.
Then we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back with questions by Ms. Pruitt. And so we'll come back at 10 of the hour. Did you have something before break, Dr. Lerner?
No.
Okay. Okay. Because I think we should have at least a 15-minute break. 10 of the hour. We're off the record. We are back on the record. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were all here. We are not back on the record.
Actually,
So like
I'll ask.
March.
Yeah.
We are now back on the record.
Right.
Okay, we are up to Ms. Pruitt, if Ms. Pruitt has any questions for Ms. Torres. Oh,
Madam
sorry.
Chair, during the break, I was informed of one question I needed to pursue with Ms. Torres, so if I could do that.
Yes, Mr. Coleman, why don't you complete your direct?
Thank you. Ms. Torres, normally the hearing board issues an order that excess emission fees be paid in full within 15 days after the date of the variance order once granted. It would, Eastern Municipal Water District, does Eastern Municipal Water District have an alternative request in terms of how the excess emission fee should be paid?
Yes, we'd like to propose paying the fees quarterly within 15 days of the end of the quarter, which is condition 9 of the proposed conditions.
And why would this be preferable for Eastern Municipal Water District?
This will allow us to base the fees on the actual emissions from the engine operation compared to the minimum daily fee and make sure that the appropriate fees are paid.
Would it also avoid the need for having to seek a refund at the end if the project gets done sooner?
Yes.
And would it also avoid you having to come up with a huge lump sum at the beginning?
Yes.
Just one clarification on that. Did you just say that the first reason was so that minimum fees, I forget what they're called, but the minimum daily fees would not have to be paid because that would require a separate request?
No.
No, just that the actual excess emission fees could be calculated and compared to the minimum daily fee, and then whichever is greater would be paid.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr.
No,
Coleman?
that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Pruitt, any questions for Ms. Torres?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Torres.
Good morning.
In Exhibit 4, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4.
Okay.
And you have the excess emissions calculations. Were the excess emissions calculations based on actual emissions or potential emissions?
They're based on potential emissions based on the permit limits and the difference between those limits between the new 1110.2 limits and the existing permit limits. If the engines continue to operate according to their current permit as proposed, the excess based on fuel consumption is calculated in this exhibit.
Thank you. And directing your attention to page 3 of the petition, question number, Yes, number 9.
Okay.
You seem to be requesting relief from condition number 11, testing to demonstrate compliance with Rule 1110.2 concentration limits is required once every 2 years or every 8,760 operating hours. The testing can be executed with compliance with the Rule 1110.2 concentration limits in Table 3B cannot be demonstrated. And I would like to know why would you need a variance from that condition?
We can execute the testing every 2 years or 8760 operating hours. However, if that condition requires that we show compliance with Rule 1110.2, which is what we're seeking relief from, so we can show compliance with our existing permit limits. But there is a difference between what's in 1110.2 and what is in our permit. Does that answer the question?
So you would be,
We would still be conducting the testing as required in the frequency that it's required.
and further, with condition number 13, the inspection and monitoring plan required by these conditions include the requirement to notify the district when Rule 1110.2 emission limits are exceeded. You're asking for relief from that.
It's similar to the testing where we will continue to follow our inspection and monitoring plan, as well as, which includes testing with a portable analyzer to show compliance. But that compliance would be compared to our existing permit limits, which will be different than what would be required under 1110.2. So that is the discrepancy in that condition.
And lastly, condition number 14, the operator shall comply with the reporting requirements of 1110.2 F1HI through 3 pertaining to any equipment breakdown that results in emissions in excess of the rule emission limits.
It's the same reasoning where all these requirements are pointing to the rule limits, which we will not be showing compliance with. We will be showing compliance with our permit limits. But we will still follow the reporting if anything is above the permit limits.
Thank you.
If I may, I think the issue is an interpretation one, and the concern is if the district interprets the condition as not only, for example, the breakdown one or the notify the district when a Rule 1110.2 emission limits are exceeded, we're basically going to be exceeding them every day until the electrification project. I don't think we want to be notifying the district every day, oh yeah, we're over again today. So if the district agrees that these would only apply to the extent they exceed the permit limits, I guess, rather than the new 1110.2 limits, we probably wouldn't need a variance from these.
We could also take care of that by restricting the variance simply to, for example, in condition number 14, the portion which says that results in emissions in excess of rule limits as opposed to permit limits. And we would carefully carve out the variance.
Right. It's certainly not our intent to not implement the inspection and maintenance plan and the notify about breakdowns and do the required testing as we.
Yeah.
You have 1 moment, please. And nothing further of this witness. Thank you.
Dr. Lerner had questions?
You'll be sort of illegal after January 1st because of the variant, that's why you're seeking the variance. And that's because you're going to be operating both engines 1 and 3. What would happen if you substituted 2 for either 1 and 3? Would it make any difference, or would there be a cost issue? Could you help me understand that?
Yeah, the number 2 engine, which is the 1110.2 compliant engine, cannot handle the peak aeration needs on its own. So it needs to operate with at least one of the biogas engines.
That's my point. Take either 1 and 3 out and substitute 2. Would it make a difference in terms of being out of variance? I mean, requiring the variance?
No.
Senator?
Waiting for you to answer my question that I forgot regarding
Which one did you
the
forget?
NOV and, okay, and the permit dates not being in focus.
Oh, yes. So as I mentioned before, whenever there's any revision to any piece of equipment at the facility, because it's Title V, they're all in a section package. So Section D of the Title V permit is all of the permits to operate. And if there's a change, let's say in a permit condition to a odor scrubber or something else at the facility, the whole section will be reissued with a new date for that Title V revision. So that date that you're referencing does not reflect the date that that equipment was last permitted.
Oh, I see.
And I think you had, that was associated with the NOV, is that correct?
The NOV was observed January 2016.
Yeah, so the NOV we received the NOV in October of 2017, and they backdated it to the date of violation being January 2016 because it was for anything that was reported in our Title V annual certification report. So if we did a portable analyzer test required by 1110.2 and that test didn't pass and we corrected the issue within the timeframes allowed in 1110.2, which are 24 hours, we still have to report that under Title V, and so those are included in that NOV. Does that answer your question?
How many such violations there were? I mean, problems that occurred during that time period that you all can recall?
For every single, I don't know the exact count. I don't know if the district has that.
So that was about, and the permit was issued December 5, 2017.
Yeah, we have multiple engines at the facility, odor control equipment, the wastewater process permits. So any little thing, even if it, I shouldn't say little thing, but if it's a record keeping oversight, you know, we didn't do a weekly H2S testing for our biofilter, that would be included in the certification report, which is part of that NOV.
So you bunched them all in one report.
We're required to do that, yes.
There's a time for compliance, could be.
Well, in the report, the report details when compliance is achieved, so there typically isn't much of a time lag. It was, I guess, more of when the district actually issued the violation.
Okay. You talked about using natural gas in these engines, looking for a temporary fix temporarily. And you talked about the difference in pounds per day of 0.07. Is that significant or insignificant?
The 0.07?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on who you're asking.
I'm asking you.
I guess for the cost associated and the short operation, it does not appear significant to me.
Doesn't that appear what?
Significant.
So then you wouldn't use it then, is that correct? There's no reason for you to go switch to natural gas.
I guess I'm confused on the question, but what the 0.07 is basically is comparing if we continued operation on using digester gas and the engines the way that they are currently operating versus converting them and adding controls to them and flaring the gas. So the emissions from flaring plus operation of natural gas compared to continued operation on digester gas, the difference between those two kind of A and B options is about 0.07 in NOx reduction.
It's essentially insignificant based on the cost. Never mind.
Ms. Byrd?
I just wanted to follow up, and I believe that they said you would know, and that was, I had asked about manufacturer's guarantee. There was something mentioned in the petition that the manufacturer guaranteed that you could meet the emission limit.
Yes, the Noxtech company had approached South Coast during the 1110.2 period when the biogas limits were originally lowered in that rule as a feasible technology that was more cost-effective for mid-sized plants such as ours. And they guaranteed that they could meet the limits. And so in cooperation, EMWD and the district embarked on this pilot study. There was an installation up north in Woodville at a landfill that supported that it could meet the lower limits. However, so actually EMWD went up there and did our own kind of third-party source testing to validate that that was the case. And it was with their operation. However, as demonstrated here, when we actually did the pilot and applied it to a wastewater treatment plant, the differences between our fuel and theirs, obviously the technology did not work for our installation.
So is the Woodfield also a waste treatment plant? Or
It's a
you're saying
landfill.
landfill?
Yeah.
Okay. So you embarked on this based on that guarantee from that facility to AQMD and to yourself. Okay. Also, I had one other question. And I'm not sure if you could answer it, but you did mention it. And that was, there's pre-negotiation for the equipment that was mentioned and sole sourcing. Is that the norm for the district, for EMWD to do sole sourcing?
Not typically. If you want additional details on that, I'll probably defer to Joe, but it is not typically part of our process.
So that is an effort on the part of the EMWD to expedite?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
I missed something that you had testified to, and I'm hoping you can just repeat it, and I apologize. But when Mr. Coleman asked you regarding reducing excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible, you had mentioned that you normally reduce emissions by doing something, and possibly favoring an engine. I just missed
Yeah, no worries. It actually kind of applies to Leaner's question about operating engine number 2. We have some restraints in our current permits for simultaneous operation of both of the biogas engines. So in order to accommodate that, we operate the natural gas middle engine in combination with one of the biogas engines. So we would continue that operation.
Okay, unless there is a breakdown or something and you need the backup engine.
Right, unless there's a breakdown or if there's some kind of conflict during the sequencing of construction for the installation of the electric motors.
And that doesn't need to be a condition of the variance because it is always followed, that particular procedure?
Yes.
Okay. And then the only other question I have is, you don't have to answer it right away, but I would like for your facility as a whole to consider that the increments of progress, you're asking for a variance to last possibly a year and a half, and it would end approximately 2 years from now. And the increments of progress that are listed are really only 2, with the exception of the final compliance. And I'd like to see, if possible, something else that would help us know that you're moving this along expeditiously. And it doesn't have to be dates certain, because you don't know them yet. But they could be, for example, within 30 days of the final design to apply for a permit, or with expedited processing, or within such and such a number of days of receipt of the permit to either order the equipment or to begin installation, commence installation. Something that would help us know that you are on track to do this in an expedited fashion. Because I don't think these 2 increments of progress are doing that. So it's a question, but it's a question that I think you probably want to consult with others before answering.
Yes, I would like to consult with others, but I do think that the conditions do support that regular report of progress to staff, in that we will be doing a monthly update and providing any details and delays and things like that, but we will discuss any additional increments that we can include.
That would be great, because just to a reminder, we are separate, and the order would be separate from actual staff of the district. And so I'd like the order to be strong,
Okay.
strongly moving this forward as well.
We would have no objection to also providing the monthly reports to the hearing board. I mean, we could do that.
That might be a good idea.
Excuse me, I'd like to suggest a status hearing in perhaps early March 2019.
Would there be any objection to that, Mr. Coleman?
No.
Okay. I don't have any other questions other than on another break to consider if there are any other increments of progress that can be added in.
Yeah, we went back and forth with the district about this too, and part of the constraints we're operating under is until the contract actually gets let and the contractor then comes back with a construction schedule. A lot of these, what would be firm construction dates, are not firm at all now. So that's why I think maybe the status hearing, set a status hearing with a potential hearing to modify the conditions or order. After the bid has been let and we have a construction schedule, we can actually then come back in and with firmer milestones that the board could consider.
And we'll deliberate on that, but it seems to make sense based on the fact that it doesn't begin until January 2019. Any other questions from Ms. Torres? Seeing none.
Okay, I'm going to,
I was going to say, Mr. Coleman, if you have any other witnesses, but I would think it just
I do. I want to call Mr. Wall to walk through the process. Senator Holden and ask for a description of the treatment process, and I think he can do that pretty quickly.
If we can do that quickly.
Yeah.
And pretty much limiting it as possible to whatever is necessary to an understanding of what the variance, to the ICEs and the processes that the variance is seeking.
Better?
Okay. Call Jeff Wall. Mr. Wall, will you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
My name is Jeff Wall. I'm the Assistant General Manager in charge of Operations and Maintenance. It's spelled Jeff. Last name is Wall.
And were you sworn as a witness earlier this morning?
Yes, I was.
And you understand you're testifying under oath?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Holden had asked a question about how the process works. I mean, it comes in, I guess, at the headworks and goes through the process and exits somewhere else as treated effluent. Could you just run through where it comes in, the various operations here on the site plan of where things occur and then where things end up?
Yes, the wastewater from the community generally always enters the front end of the plant, which is the headworks. And this is where we separate the settleable solids such as sands, grit, rocks, as well as floatable plastics and rags from the process and get it removed immediately. From there, it goes through the primary clarifiers, which are here in Plant 1 and here in Plant 2, and then the future Plant 3 primary clarifiers. And at that location, grease and oil are skimmed off the top of the liquid wastewater, and the heavy soluble organic material is removed immediately and taken to the anaerobic sludge digesters where the sludge is processed biologically. Downstream from the primaries, we enter the aeration process, which is the heart of the plant, as Joe had mentioned earlier. And this is where we, in general terms, a wastewater plant is Mother Nature on steroids. We use beneficial bacteria naturally occurring in the environment and we create conditions to have the bacteria that we choose or we select to flourish. and that happens within the aeration basin. So we, with the right amount of air and a management of the incoming organic matter in terms of a ratio, as well as the management of the biological bacteria that we're purposely growing, it serves to treat the ammonia in the wastewater as well as oxidize the organics.
Senator.
Right, the iteration that you're pointing to is just below plant 1 and plant 2, is that correct? Iteration, they're the same as it?
Aeration.
Aeration,
Aeration, yes. So
it's the same as in the plant?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So the blowers that we've been discussing are providing the air to the microbiology that's within these aeration tanks.
Carry on.
And then after the aeration, we go through settling and coagulation. We filter, and then we chlorinate to disinfect the water to produce recycled water in accordance with California Title 22 for distribution and resale. Is that
And
too
this,
brief?
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Is that too brief? Did that answer your question?
No, I think, excellent.
Good bad water, the good water.
Yeah, that's correct. So we try.
And just to be clear, this process goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Correct.
There are no shutdowns.
Correct.
Okay.
And all this is in compliance as best we can, we try, with the Air Quality Management District requirements, as well as State Water Resource Control Board requirements, Regional Water Quality Control Board, EPA, OSHA. There's a whole lot of compliance-related matters associated with operating the entire facility.
In
Senator.
terms of water, how many gallons per day?
So currently, we're treating about 13.8 million gallons per day. And it's ultimately designed, this expansion will take us all the way up to 23.
Treating 18 million gallons per day. So it goes in as 18, it comes out when it's purified.
Correct. It comes out as
You
recycled
get all the
water.
metals and contaminants
Yes.
diffused out of it. So what do you end up with?
So we end up with Title 22 tertiary
How much
quality.
water? About
We'll produce about right at 13.2 million gallons per day of
about 5.
tertiary water. And then we resell that for reuse, such as golf courses, streetscapes, agricultural interests, cooling water for industrial plants, such as there's a GE facility that produces natural gas, or uses natural gas to produce power. It's a peaking plant, so it really doesn't run that frequently right now. But we have the ability to send water to them for cooling water.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is it a clarification, or should we? Yes, go ahead, Dr. Lerner has a question.
Very quickly, the output is 13.8. What is the input?
So the input today is about 13.8 and the output is about 13.2. Some of the water is used internally within the plant for like cooling seals on pumps or for washing down process areas, things like that.
Ms. Pruitt, did you have any questions on this testimony?
I did not, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Coleman, did you have any other questions? No. Okay. I just had one question, which I probably should have asked. So if the blower pumps and if the aeration were to cease at some point, because you just testified that creates the environment for these bacteria to thrive, what would be the result? Would the bacteria die, and then what would happen?
Correct. We would basically lose the entire biological treatment process. We would cease to remove ammonia, would be the most noticeable upfront issue. Then we would be ceasing to remove or adequately treat the harmful organics that are in the wastewater as well. So that would all cease within probably 2 days max.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members, on the process? Or okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Coleman, any other witnesses?
No.
Okay. Ms. Pruitt, do you have any witnesses that you wish to present?
No, thank you.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask if any member of the public wishes to be heard. Seeing none. Mr. Coleman, you're closing.
Yes, thank you. Look, we recognize that this is a long variance, but and I know that concerns have been raised about the length of time between the unsuccessful Noxtech demonstration and the completion of the successful Tecogen demonstration. I think we've tried to give you an idea of the complexity and the need for reliability of this processing facility, the multiple issues involved, which mean dealing not only with the aeration blower but digester gas. And the bottom line is they needed a plan for the best way to proceed for their customers, ratepayers, and for the environmental, meeting the environmental obligations the facility is obligated to meet. And I think the testimony was that immediately upon the completion of those demonstration programs, they retained a consultant to look at the situation and advise them, come up with a plan that met their needs for meeting the their district's emission requirements, dealing with the biogas issue, and assuring complete and utter reliability of the system. And that took a while. That took a year. And once that report came back in, they immediately began implementing it. At the end of the day, we're going to have 3 IC engines that emit NOx, replaced by electric motors. Eventually, they will have a plan. They will utilize the biogas beneficially through another project that really we haven't gone into in any detail here because I don't think it's that germane. I want to make one thing perfectly clear on the record. Eastern Municipal Water District was not led down the garden path or coerced into either of these demonstration projects by the district. They were promising technologies. One looks like it's paid off, the other didn't. And it was done totally in cooperation with the district, and we appreciate I think each side, the district staff and Eastern Municipal Water District staff appreciates the willingness to work with the other and the openness that was displayed throughout the process and the willingness to try to demonstrate these technologies. That has brought us to a situation where they have decided that the best answer in terms of reliability, energy efficiency, and minimizing emissions is to electrify. That could not be done immediately because it requires a new substation to be brought in by Edison, a new electrical power, an entirely new electrical infrastructure because the existing infrastructure cannot support electrification. They have committed to doing this as quickly as possible. They have expedited the process for long lead time items such as the aeration blowers, motors, and the emergency generator, which would supply backup power through pre-negotiation and sole sourcing those contracts so that as soon as the bid is awarded, the orders can be put in and the delivery of those items are no longer on the critical path. It's other things that have to be done at the facility to get it ready for them to be installed that will be on the path. We've worked out conditions with the district that provide for monitoring of emissions, reporting, assuring that, and regular reporting, monthly reporting on the progress being made or any obstacles that have cropped up along the way. We are certainly amenable to also providing those reports to the hearing board, and we think Ms. Pruitt's suggestion of a status conference and sometime next year after the I would suggest after the, maybe 30 days or so after the bid award, I guess we could schedule a status conference, and it could be continued if the bid award, we don't have the information from the contractor, but we'd have a status conference. Once we have a construction schedule from the contractor, we'd be happy to come in and present it to the staff and the hearing board to make sure we're all on track for the successful completion of this project. And we think this variance will keep things on the right track and get this done as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Pruitt, your closing.
Thank you. It is not beyond the Water District's control to comply with Rule 1110.2 for the year and a half at issue. They can do so by converting the engines to natural gas and flaring the excess. The question remains, or becomes, whether it is beyond their reasonable control to comply. The findings don't require that compliance be impossible before the petitioner can get a variance. The findings require that only the compliance be beyond the petitioner's reasonable control. In this case, petitioner has presented evidence that converting to natural gas will save, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is up to the hearing board to decide if that is a reasonable expenditure. Petitioner also testified that they will need to flare the excess gas. The hearing board must decide if this is a reasonable option. Finally, petitioner testified that the net benefit from an emission standpoint would be less than 1 pound of NOx per day. The hearing board must ultimately decide whether this is a worthwhile benefit, given the expenditures of funds and necessity for flaring during the year and a half at issue. The district is not opposed to the issuance of the variance, subject to the proposed conditions and increments of progress. I'd like to remind the hearing board that we want to retain the testing and notification requirements in Rule 1110.2, having the permit limit be the trigger for any notification requirement. And finally, we'd like to add a status hearing date to the conditions at a time determined by the hearing board to be the most appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing board members, anyone wish to begin discussions? Mr. Camarena.
Thank you. I think Ms. Pruitt has accurately described the situation. Petitioner is not in violation at the moment, but will be come January 1st, 2019, when the permit expires. And they have a choice, and that choice is to convert to natural gas only on those internal combustion engines numbers 1 and 3 that are currently dual-fueled. And the evidence is that that will cost about $325,000. In addition, there'll be another $13,000 or more per month for the extra natural gas that they will need. In addition, the digester gas will be flared. The net benefit is less than 1/10 of a pound NOx per day, and it just isn't worth it, doesn't make sense. I have no other comment.
I agree. I would also add that with regard to beyond the reasonable control of petitioner, first of all, this is an essential public service. And I had some questions with regard to has the Eastern District Municipal Water, sorry, I have them wrong, whether the petitioner has moved quickly enough, but I feel satisfied in terms of moving quickly enough to try to meet that, the earliest date with which they could comply. This is a huge, I think it's $13 million project. one they don't want to undertake without all of the appropriate studies, thought, design, and ultimately, which we've heard will save significant emissions later on because they will be electric. So with that, I think I can certainly find beyond reasonable control. And of course, requiring that compliance. Mr. Camarena, did you want to add something?
Yes, with respect to the time required. It is reasonable, I believe, to look at a successful control technology and see whether or not that is applicable to a similar application. And I think the petitioner gave it a good effort. You never know when you embark on essentially a research project, how long it'll take to get the answer that you need. Unfortunately, for the Noxtech, the crystal ball was a little bit hazy. I'm reminded about Mr. Thomas Edison, who tried a whole bunch of things before he found the light.
Ms. Byrd?
I would agree that I believe it's beyond their reasonable control. And one of the, in the testimony, there was one statement that kind of sticks out for me, and that was in the rulemaking. I think it was Ms. Torres who mentioned that at the time of the rulemaking, that this company had represented to both the district and I guess to whomever else was a part of the rulemaking that they could meet these emission limits. And so this facility undertook this measure even for the 4 years, I would imagine, because it was represented that this company could meet this limit, and so I don't think it was unreasonable for them to try. And I also am reminded that when the district changes rules, and especially when they maybe reduce the emissions that will be allowed in the new rule, that sometimes it's technology pushing, and they're trying to come up with a way to reach a lower limit, and it's not always feasible to do so. So I kind of So I think it's beyond reasonable control, because I think that they made the effort that they could have made under the circumstances.
Mr. Camarena?
One final thought. Going forward, the time that it's going to take, I do not find that unreasonable. If you get a solar system on the roof of your home, it takes longer than you would think. And so when you look at the magnitude of this project, I think that's a reasonable time.
Anyone else wish to talk about beyond reasonable control or any other discussion, Senator?
Well, it's beyond their control that they're to be in compliance by January 2019. It was imposed on them by 1110.2. And so therefore, they're not in violation as we speak, but at that point in time, they will be. Mm-hmm. And it's clear to me they made every effort to try to be in compliance by spending millions of dollars and lots of time, 4 years. They try to follow the district's direction as to methodology and a new technology that they could employ or use to be in compliance. That didn't work out, and they had to flip-flop to the electrical retrofit, and that took a couple of years, but it seemed to be a proven technology for providing, for obtaining the limits, 11.1002. So I think that they're entitled to the variance.
Thank you. And I believe it would be an unreasonable... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Senator.
He talked about going out for bid. I didn't hear him say it was going to be, was it a bid or sole source? He said they would do it sole source. The only question, I don't want to reopen the discussion, but whether that sole source could provide the time frame that's required to meet for installation and operation of the system. Sole source.
And expediting of the schedule as a result. I agree, and also, I believe it would compliance would result in an arbitrary, unreasonable taking of property. Requiring compliance, well, either one, they'd have to stop using their biogas technology, and so either, number one, there would not be sufficient aeration, and we've heard that that would, within 2 days, have catastrophic, essentially, impacts on what has been described as the heart of the entire process. Or, as Mr. Cameron, as you explained, there would be the alternative that they considered. However, it's extremely costly, and with the flaring does not result in very much of a decrease in NOx emissions. Without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants, again, we have the options of compliance versus non-compliance. And even though the excess emissions are calculated to be 12.29 pounds per day, if they complied, would only be 0.07 because that biogas needs to be combusted somehow. Curtailment's not an option, cannot shut down. They have no control over the flow coming into the facility. Reducing excess emissions, we heard testimony on that with regard to their ongoing use of the natural gas ICE, which is in compliance, and only one of the two biogas, as long as it's possible without a breakdown of the natural gas, and that will continue. And the proposed conditions include conditions which require monitoring of emissions, as well as fuel use and other markers. Any other thoughts, Senator?
It was suggested and stipulated to the fact that it would have a rehearing a short period of time after the first of the year. That was not specified yet. But it's okay to have that because there's so many uncertainties in terms of whether or not the delivery schedule of components in a timely fashion to be able to meet the deadline for 2020.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I think that should be part of the discussion. I had mentioned during the hearing that I did not believe that the two proposed increments were sufficient, but with that status hearing, I do believe, status and modification hearing should, and then we could set more stringent, or more certain, I should say, increments of progress at that time, hopefully. And we could do that as part of a motion. I would suggest looking at the calendar, given that the final design will be completed at the end of February, that be towards the end of March, that status and modification. And I'm wondering if the parties would agree that Wednesday, March 20th would be first of all, a date when the parties are available, and second of all, would that be sufficient amount of time with which to come back for such a status conference, or hearing, I should say? Mr. Coleman?
We have no problem with that. That's fine.
Ms. Pruitt?
There's no problem with that date, thank you.
Okay. Senator? Oh, sorry. It'll be part of a motion, but the suggested date would be March 20th, 2019. And with that, if 19, that's right. Since 18 has already passed and 20 is way too far. Anyone else have discussion on the findings before I ask if anyone would like to make a motion? And if no one would, I would be happy to. Anyone like to make a motion? I will make, sorry, have Ed do it. I will make the motion. In the matter of Eastern Municipal Water District Case Number 4937-57, I move that we grant the requested regular variance, which would begin on January 1st, 2019, when the rule requirements go into effect, and would go until June 30th, 2020, or until final compliance, whichever occurs first. It would be for the facility address of 42565 Avenida Alvarado in Temecula, 92590. It would be for the 2 internal combustion engines that are listed on page 2 of the petition in item number 6. The application numbers are listed there. They are the 2 biogas and natural gas engines. It will be from several rules and conditions of the facility's permits, which are listed also on page 3 of the petition, item number 9, and I'll go through them. 203B 3002C1, which requires compliance with conditions of permit and Title V permit. And specifically, condition number 4, as is listed in the 2 permits for the 2 engines, with regard to NOx emissions. Also, condition number 11 on both. However, we'll be very specific with condition number 11. And it's from the portion of that requirement, which is actually for, I think, source testing, that states that the operator shall determine compliance with the NOx emission limits by, and that is because they do not believe they will determine compliance. Condition number 13, similarly, it would be from that portion of that condition which reads, in accordance with the applicable provisions of Rule 1110.2 F1. I can't read it, but that last portion, and again, it's just specifically because they will not be in accordance with. In addition, condition number 14, and specifically that results in emissions in excess of rule emission limits. In addition, also Rule 1110.2 D1F, capital F, and little and H, and in conjunction that those 2 require compliance by January 1st, 2019. I think I got. And Section K, Condition 8, which simply requires compliance with all regulatory requirements. I think that's all of them. I further move that we adopt the proposed variance conditions in Exhibit A. I just want to make the following changes, and that is, firstly, to remove from the list of conditions number 3 and number 4, and instead make them increments of progress, numbers 1 and number 2. Actually, I'll make them number 1 and number 3, respectively, and number 2 in increments of progress will be the return. And so the parties shall return for a hearing, a status and modification hearing on March 20th, 2019. That will be increment of progress number 2. And that just makes it cleaner. That's why I'm moving that. And then All of the other conditions after that will be renumbered, beginning with condition number 5 being renumbered as condition number 3, and so on. And finally, what was condition number 7, I would add after the closed parenthetical, which states who at the AQMD these reports should go to at the end of each calendar month, and add and to the clerk of the board. At clerk of board at aqmd.gov. And excess emissions are expected to be 12.29 pounds of NOx per day, 2.48 pounds of CO per day, and 3.03 pounds per day of VOC. And that completes my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Mr. Coleman.
We had requested the payment of the excess emission fees quarterly.
Oh, okay.
That-
So how should we, and that will be part of my motion.
Since it starts on January 1, I think that within 15 days after the end of each calendar quarter, the emission fee shall be paid. Petitioners will pay emission fees, excess emission fees to the clerk of the board, or to the clerk of the board within 15 days after the close of each calendar quarter during the duration of this variance.
Okay, let's start that again. So it's starting, petitioner shall pay all applicable fees to the clerk of the board, or the variance shall be invalidated pursuant to Rule 303K, except for excess emission fees, which shall be paid
Within 15 days after the close of each calendar quarter during, for the duration of this variance.
Why do they need 15 days?
15 days is generally given, but usually, the usual, let's have a discussion on this, board members. The usual is 15 days, within 15 days of approval of the variance. But through testimony of Ms. Torres, the request was made to make it quarterly, beginning when, after the start of the variance, so that there's not one big fee being paid up front, and it can be spaced out in a more manageable means. And I don't recall if there was another rationale, board members, any other thing that I might have missed, but that was the request. And I think on that basis, and also because then they'll be in a better position to know what actual excess emissions were, so that they can be paying actual emissions versus the minimum amount due. Okay, so with that, I'm going to add that to my motion as it was read into the record by Mr. Coleman. And
I'll
do you
accept
accept
that.
that? Okay, Mr.
And I
Wright.
do have a question on the motion.
Yes.
Okay. The increment of progress number 1 is the blower electrification project by February 28th. And then I thought you said the increment of progress number 2 is the status report on March 20. Oh, I see. March 20th. And in Exhibit A, what is proposed as condition 4 provides the construction contract by May 31st. Did you want to include that as an increment?
Yes. So that was, it might have been unclear. So what was condition number 3 and 4 will be taken out of the condition section and put in increments of progress, and they will be numbered as 1 and 3 respectively, with the second increment of progress being the status and modification hearing on March 20th, 2019.
With that clarification, the second still stands.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Senator, how do you vote? Aye. Dr. Lerner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Camarena, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion passes 5-0, and the variance is granted, and thank you all. This is the time of the day where I will normally ask if there's any other business for the board members, and I'm going to ask everyone's indulgence for a moment, because I wanted to take a moment to recognize Ed Camarena on this, his last hearing, serving as a regular member of the hearing board. Ed is not leaving us. He is staying on as an alternate to the engineer member, and I'm sure as a consultant and mentor to our newest member. But he has been such a fixture and rock on the board. I think it's appropriate to recognize his service at this time. Ed has served as the engineer member of the hearing board for 24 years, and he led the board as chair for 2 decades. He presided over almost 4,000 cases. He established a reputation as a man who accorded a fair and impartial hearing to all. During his tenure, no variances were revoked by ARB because they all required compliance with emission standards and district rules and regulations as quickly as possible. No AOCs were found by EPA to have been improperly issued or overturned for any reason. No decisions of the board have been overturned by any court of law, although a few have been appealed to a higher court by various facilities. In short, Ed has carefully upheld our important district rules and helped to keep the air of the South Coast Basin clean and its residents healthy. On top of all of this, he is respected by all who have come before the board, his fellow board members, and the hardworking members of the office of the clerk of the board. I think the independent report of the hearing board's operations in 2017 summed it up best by saying, quote, "The leadership of the hearing board is extremely knowledgeable, experienced, hardworking, and strives to be efficient and fair. Chair Camarena is widely viewed as doing an exemplary job in directing the hearing board's operations and chairing hearings." I look forward to serving with you, Ed, in your new role from time to time, and I'm sure you look forward to the windows that your new position will open up in your life. Thank you for everything you've done. And I think a round of applause at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I was, last night too, and this morning I was thinking, what do you say after 58 years of service? What you didn't mention was before my time on the hearing board, I was a member of the district staff, and I see some of my friends here. And that was for another 33 years. And the thought that came to me is gratitude. Gratitude. I'm grateful for this experience, for I lived through the worst pollution in the LA Basin, grew up in what we call our neighborhood, we called it barrio, which if it was in South Central, it would be called a hood. Right downwind of some of the biggest sources of air pollution that were that had very little controls. And we experienced the days when you could not only see the smog, but you could feel it in your lungs and in your throat and in your eyes when they were burning. We don't have that today because of the efforts of various air pollution agencies. The program started here locally and expanded to the state and to the federal government, all working together. So we don't have days when we have hundreds of days a year when children in schools are excused from physical activity. I'm grateful that I lived through that change. I'm grateful, looking back in the early to late 60s, even into the early 70s, when the ozone levels were increasing, despite of the efforts that were going on. For part of that time, there were no air quality standards. EPA did not exist. ARB did not exist. We didn't have environmental impact reports, and a lot of things didn't exist. But yet, through the efforts of the various agencies, in the late 60s, early 70s, we saw the levels of ozone start to level off. And we we wondered, is this real or is it just a quirk of the weather? And a few more years went by, and that's got to be the best feeling ever when we decided that, yeah, it's real. The levels are improving. And they have continued to improve. Today, the agency faces not only the continuing problem of the air quality standards, but the newer problems of toxic emissions. And so there's a lot of work yet to do. I'm glad I was part of it. I'm going to step back a little bit and be a pinch hitter for Mr. Mohan Balgapolan. I think I pronounced it right. And he's going to be a great addition to this hearing board. I've worked with him. I know him well. I'm going to leave him my coffee cup warmer. You'll need it for those long hearings. I want to express my appreciation to the staff, the hearing board. Always there. Very few people know how much work is involved and how much detail is involved in what they do, and they do it extraordinarily well. I also wish to express appreciation for Mr. Paul White, who runs our audiovisual stuff, and anytime there's a little bit of a glitch, he pops right in and fixes it. I have a special place in my heart for the inspectors. They're the people that go out there all by themselves and confront the public who is upset, who thinks we're not doing enough, that not enough is being done, and then goes and confronts the, maybe confront is not a good word, but, and meets with the industry folks, and they think that maybe you're doing too much, putting us out of business. And they're out there all alone, whereas the rest of us are over here, maybe not comfortably either, but at least we have friends around. I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. I'll step back and I'll be a pinch hitter for another few years. Thank you.
I'm going to let Mr. Coleman speak in a moment. I'm just going to let everyone know this isn't the end of our celebration of Mr. Camarena. We are going to have some dessert after our lunch break and a little party. But Mr. Coleman.
Thank you. I think it's more than coincidence, probably destiny, that this hearing was scheduled on this day so that I could be here. I feel blessed to be here to participate. I feel devastated that you're moving to part-time status because, as Ms. Prusak said you've been the rock on this board. I mean, look, I've known you for many, many years since we worked together at the AQMD. And you were, I can attest to the fairness of your deliberations for the times you ruled against me. And there were some. And you always kept me on my toes and forced me to put on the best case that I could and provide the information the hearing board needed. You've left a solid group. I'm sure they'll continue, but you will be sorely missed. And maybe if there's any good that comes out of this, maybe we can do some more socializing together now that you won't be sitting every time I'm before you. So I look forward to that.
And of course, Ms. Feldman would like to be recognized.
Thank you so much. I also feel like serendipity brought me here today to participate, however tangentially, in your final hearing as a regular member. On behalf of the Office of General Counsel, I would like to thank you for your many years of exemplary service to this board and to this district. I cannot even begin to characterize the respect that we have for you up on the second floor, and that you have maintained that respect throughout your tenure on this hearing board and its multiple incarnations that you have been able to witness through the years. You have been consistent in your fairness and your deliberative process, and we admire that immensely and will miss you just as immensely.
Thank you, Ms. Feldman. With that, Senator?
I want to echo what's the wonderful expressions already stated by those regarding Ed's tenure here at the hearing board as a member and as the chairperson. This hearing board is, as Ed would put it sometime, has been under the radar. And in being in that position, the public is not aware of all the good work that it's done and the contribution it's made to people having a long or expected life because of the clean air. And holding the stationary sources and others accountable for what they were doing in order to make sure they meet the requirements set forth by this district. Some of you may not remember this, and I didn't know it until I was told that the legislature decided to intervene and give a new expression of what this board should be like. The other members were relieved from this board, as I've been told. They only kept one person. That was Ed. And it makes a lot of sense based on the number of years he's been here, the contribution he's made, not just when he came to the board, but as an engineer in the field working for the various pollution districts. That's how you gain your knowledge and experience. I've been in there and I understand what that's all about. When I first came, I mentioned to Ed that I was a facilitator for AQMD for the County of Los Angeles in Supervisor Hahn's district. They had a problem, Nate, you go. But before I started going, Ed was already there. So Ed, you will certainly not be missed because you'll still be here. And best of luck.
Ms. Byrd?
I didn't know that we were going to get a chance to say anything, but
I didn't want to spring this on everybody because we are gonna have a party.
we are going to have a party. But this is on the record, and I want this on the record. I have the utmost respect for you, and thank you for teaching us, because that's how I feel being on this board, that you have taught us to exercise integrity, to be fair, to be respectful of those individuals who come before us. And I appreciate that a great deal.
Dr. Lerner.
When I was in medical school, we had a terrible time. It was run by a bunch of tyrants. We were always afraid of getting thrown out of medical school. Indeed, half my class never graduated. I was very lucky. We reserved the term prince for those teachers who were going to break up also, who were very special, who were kind, who were straightforward, who were demanding, but not unreasonable, and who taught. And those are simply just a few of the qualities that I've experienced with Ed. And he is the third one in my lifetime that I would assign that word to. I am honored to be on this court, flattered that he would even talk to me and teach me, because he's been so valuable to my continuing education on the board. And I only wish him well, for him and his family. And don't take it personally out there, but I hope we see you often.
I hope Mohan takes lots of vacations. In the meantime, I'm going to ride my bike.
Mohan, we're really building big shoes here. Anyway, I'm so glad that everyone was here when I saw how many people were in this room today, because I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged and honored Ed. We honored you on the record for all and for you. And I feel that it was serendipitous that was the case. And thank you. And we will continue, as I said, with all of this after our lunch break. And so we are going to take our lunch break, and we will come back at 1 o'clock. Seems appropriate. At that time, we are going to be celebrating. And anyone who is coming for the board meeting may come a little early, of course. And we will then have probably what is a short board meeting, maybe half an hour after that. And we will not adjourn, but we will go off the record until then. Well, until our meeting, which will be at about 1:30 or a little bit later. We're off the record.